Welcome to part 2 of our drawing process overview. This video is going to focus on detailing our drawing with our different dimensions. Before I get into that, I'm going to make my drawing a little more user-friendly by renaming the tabs at the bottom of the sheet. If I right-click on a tab, I can get a pop-up menu, and here we have Rename. I'm going to rename Sheet 1 to 1, Engine Assembly, and then hit the Enter key. Then let's go to Sheet 2, and I'm going to rename this because this is going to be for the engine block. I'll call it 2, Engine Block. And then for the third sheet, this is for the cylinder head, so let's rename that 3, Cylinder Head. Okay, that's good. For showing my different annotations, let's start off on sheet number 2. I'm going to zoom into a couple of my views here. The most common way of getting your dimensions on your drawing is by showing the existing model dimensions. You can do that by going to the Annotate tab, and then we have our Show Model Annotations icon. When I click on it, it brings up a dialog box, and there are 6 different tabs in this dialog box. In this video, we're just going to cover this tab. We'll cover the other different tabs in subsequent videos, but this first tab is for creating dimensions. You also have tabs for your geometric tolerances and for your notes, surface finishes, symbols, and also for your different datums involved in geometric dimensioning and tolerancing. But on this tab, you have a type drop-down list where you can choose what kind of dimension that you want to show. We're going to be showing primarily our driving dimensions. Most people don't change this drop-down list, but be aware that you can if you want to. And here in the dialog box, it tells us that we can select views, components, and/or features for which you want to show annotations. So you can select entire components. I caution against doing that when you are detailing an individual part. For example, if I just zoom out a little bit and I pick the part right out of the model tree, you can see that it is immediately cluttered with a whole bunch of different dimensions. I don't want any of those. Let's try canceling out real quickly just so that we don't have all that stuff on the screen. Let's go back to the Show Model Annotations dialog box, and there are 2 main ways in which I will select the different dimensions that I want to show. I will select a feature in a view. So for example, here's one of our main features. I will click on it, and it previews the different dimensions that are available. And I decide, hey, I like all of these. And you can pick them individually, or if you like all of them, you can use the Select All button. There is a deselect all, but again, I want to select all of them. And then I will click the Apply button. Maybe I will try selecting that same feature or similar feature in the side view. And I take a look over here and I see this 1.5 dimension. I'm not sure what it is controlling, but I do like this 4 dimension. So I will click on it and then choose the Apply button. And there we see a preview of the different dimensions that we have appearing on the screen. Another very common way that I use for selecting my different dimensions is by walking down the features in the model tree. And I'll just do that for a few of the different features. I'll select the next major feature in the tree, and I decide, okay, I like this dimension. I'm not sure what these diameter dimensions are controlling in there. Kind of inappropriate for that view. So that's good. Let's just choose the Apply button for that. Maybe I'll try a couple other different features and I'll see, oh, I don't really like that. Okay, let's see, are any of the different dimensions showing up in any other different views? And so that is one way in which you can start detailing your different views. Let's now cancel out of here. I'm going to go to sheet 3 to start detailing some of them. And if you want these dimensions positioned a little differently, well, I'll show you how to do that later on. But again, I will go to sheet number 3, and I've got my 3 different views in here. Let's go to Show Model Annotations. And in this particular situation, there are a lot of features on top of each other. And so you can actually use Query Select in the views if that helps. So for example, I can tap right and okay, F4, that means that it's an early feature. Maybe this is the one that I want, so I will click on it. I like those two different dimensions, so I will select all and then click on the apply button. And then I decide, hey, I want to get some of the different dimensions in the top view. So let me select this hole here. And I like that one. Let me click on it and use the apply button. And you can proceed along with walking down the model tree like before. So for example, I can do the round and then click on it and choose the apply button and say, oh, what about this cut over here? I'm not really sure about those different dimensions, and just proceed along in this way. And in this particular situation, I'm going to select this diameter dimension, even though I really don't want it in this view, because I'm going to show later on how to manipulate your different dimensions to get them to appear the way that you want them to. And I'll just click the OK button, and in that way, I have selected the different dimensions from the model and made them appear on the drawing sheet. Let's go back to sheet number 2. In addition to showing the existing model annotations, you might also need to create your different dimensions. And there's an old rule of thumb that you will hear a lot of people say where they tell you that at least 95% of the dimensions that appear on the drawing sheet should come from the model. I don't know if that's entirely true anymore, just given that we have flexible modeling and also we have model-based definition. And when you manually create dimensions, there is some additional functionality that you can use involved with MBD that you don't have with your shown dimension. So just take that 95% recommendation with a grain of salt. But anyhow, I want to create my own different dimensions. Here we have our dimension icon. And the way that you dimension in your drawing is the same way that you dimension in a sketch. You pick what you want to dimension with the left mouse button and then locate the dimension with the middle mouse button. So for example, in this top view, I have a couple of different tabs. And let's say I want to dimension them. Well, I can pick one of these arcs over here. Right now it's giving me a radius dimension. I can hold down the control key and pick this other arc. And right now it's automatically giving me the distance between the center of those two different arcs. And when I'm happy, I can middle click in order to place the dimension. But let's say that I wanted to create a dimension from the tangents of the arcs. Let's say that I wanted to create a dimension for the outside. To do that, you might want to use one of your other different choices in the Select Reference dialog box. And this is a little dialog box that most people ignore, but you do have the option in here to choose the tangent to an arc or circle, the midpoint of an edge or an entity. Here you can create an intersection between entities, and also you can create some different lines by selecting vertices. And they can just be a regular line, or you can draw a horizontal line through a point or a vertical line through a point. But in this case, I'm going to use the option for creating a tangent dimension. And so I'll select this arc here. I'll hold down the control key and select that arc. And this way, I'm getting the dimension to the tangent of those two entities. So that's good for the first two dimensions that I want to create. Be aware that after you create a dimension, I'll go into manipulating your dimensions later on. If I go to move it, it's automatically going to allow me to snap to being in the middle. Same with this one over here. I can grab it. Oh, it's snapping to being in the middle of the two dimension lines. Okay, let's take a look at another example of creating some different dimensions. I'll click on the dimension icon. Let me go back to the regular select an entity button. If I click on this arc, like before, you see I'm getting a preview of a radius dimension. I am getting prompted. There was a little note that came up that told me that I could hold down the right mouse button for some other additional options. Let me just middle click in order to locate that dimension to show you the radius dimension. If you want to get the diameter dimension, well, you can do 2 left clicks with the left mouse button. Or you can just left click, and like it prompts me, if I hold down the right mouse button, I can get a pop-up menu. So from here I could choose maybe the arc length instead, but here's the diameter. I like that diameter, and I can choose to middle mouse click in order to locate it. And I've got the little line extending out over here. Later on, again, I will go into some of the other different options for modifying and manipulating your dimensions, but you do have the ability to flip the arrows, and a lot of the different dimensions have sometimes up to 4 different options for flipping the various different arrows that you have. Okay, I'm going to create one other different dimension in this particular drawing. And so here you can see that I have this dimension for the 6 height and the 7 height. Let's say I want a dimension for the overall height. Well, dimensioning standards tell us that we should only have the minimum number of dimensions. If I also dimension the overall height, well, that would sort of be a little bit redundant. So in that case, I could do a reference dimension. Let's create a dimension, and I can dimension from, say, this line here. Let me hold down the Control key and select a horizontal line over here, and then middle mouse click. And then, let me close this in order to get out of the dialog box. You could add text to the dimension. If I click on the dimension text button from the dimension tab that you get, you can add prefixes or suffixes. So one way is by going into the suffix field, and I can type in REF and then click, and there I have a reference dimension. An alternate way, you can click on the dimension text, and rather than adding a suffix right in the big field where it says dimension text, I'll type in a space and REF, and that way, hey, I've got my reference dimension located in here. All right, let's create some dimensions on sheet number 3. And in this particular situation, at this point now I want to create another view. Let's create a bottom view. Let me middle click to get out of dimension creation mode. And I'll pick this view. And then from the mini toolbar, here we have the icon for creating a projection view. I'll create a projection view down on the bottom. And I just have a few other different dimensions that I want to appear in this view. So for example, let's create a dimension, and maybe I want to dimension from the center of this hole, and hold down the Control key and select that hole. And then I can locate this dimension. Maybe I also want a dimension for the distance between this hole, hold down the Control key and select the other hole, and then middle mouse click. And so there I'm creating some linear dimensions. Let's say I want to create a diameter dimension for that circle. Well, let's just pick this arc with the left mouse button. And like before, I can hold down the right mouse button and choose diameter from the pop-up menu, and then middle mouse click in order to locate it. And let's get out of dimension mode, click the dimension, and I can flip the arrows in order to get it so that it's not extending that line, so that it makes someone potentially misunderstand what they are looking at. Another kind of dimension that you can create is an ordinate dimension. Let's go to our top view. And so we've got all these different fins for dissipating heat. Maybe I want to dimension each one of those individually. Here we have an ordinate dimension command. Be aware that there is a drop-down list. There is automatic ordinate dimensioning functionality. I tend to use that more with sheet metal parts, but let's go to the regular ordinate dimension command. And in the message area, it is prompting me to select an entity to create a new baseline, or select an existing baseline ordinate dimension to use it, or middle click to cancel. I don't have any existing baselines to use, so I will left click to establish my first baseline. Now, as I'm being prompted in both the message area and the little tooltip by my icon, press and hold Control to select an entity, middle click to cancel. So I'm just going to hold down the Control key and pick a bunch of these different lines. And you can see a preview of the ordinate dimensions that we're getting. I'll just pick a bunch of these different ones, and that's good for illustrating the point. Now I've let go of the Control key. You'll notice as I move my mouse around, it's moving the different dimensions. When I'm happy with where they are, let me middle mouse click, And then we have those different dimensions on the drawing sheet. Let me middle click to get out of dimension creation mode. Now that we have a number of our dimensions on our sheet, it's time to modify and manipulate them in order to make the drawing look better. The first easiest step is to clean up the dimensions. And the way that you can do that is by dragging a box over all the different dimensions that you want to clean. Then you hold down the right mouse button, and from the pop-up menu you can choose Clean Up Dimensions. This will bring up a dialog box, and on the Placement tab, it allows us to space our dimensions off from our geometry a distance, and then stagger subsequent dimensions this other distance from each other. And we also have the option to create snap lines. Snap lines are just going to be dashed lines that will appear on the computer screen that will help you when you are repositioning your different dimensions later on. There's also an option to break your witness lines. You can choose that if you want. And then there's also a cosmetic tab where we can automatically flip arrows and center text. So with those different choices, I will click on the Apply button. You can see that everything adjusted. I'm going to zoom in and zoom out quickly just to repaint the screen. Alternatively, you can use this icon up here or use the Control-R keyboard shortcut. So I'm happy with the way that the dimensions were cleaned up. Let's close the dialog box. Let's deselect. And here you can see some examples of the different snap lines. Again, these little dash lines. Be aware that the snap lines are not going to print out. And so if you want to see how the drawing is going to look, also let me point out something before that. You can see that a bunch of our different witness lines cross over onto the geometry. If you go to File and then Print from this ribbon, you can choose to preview the drawing, and that'll show you how they'll show up. And you can see, okay, yeah, I've got some nice gaps in there. It's not running onto the geometry, and you don't see the snap lines. I'm going to click on Close Print Setup, and it goes back to our regular view of the different dimensions. The next thing I'm going to take a look at is that I have a mismatch in the number of decimal places. So what we can do is we can modify the formatting of our dimensions. To help with that though, I'm going to go to the selection filter, and rather than leave general selected as I did when I was using the cleanup dimensions utility, I'm going to change just to dimension. And that way when I swipe a box over everything, I'll also have the dimension tab available to me. And from here, I can choose the number of decimal places that I want everything out to. Let's go with 2 decimal places and then deselect everything. And so it looks a little bit better than it did before. Okay, let's continue on with our cleanup of the drawing. So I can see that I have a bunch of different dimensions that I might want to reposition. So for example, these two are on top of each other. So I can grab them, maybe space them out a little bit more than what the initial cleanup dimensions utility did to it. So you can always click on the different dimensions and then move them around. Alternatively, you can choose to move dimensions to a different view. So for example, this 0.25 dimension, I decide that I want it in the view to the side. So I'm going to right mouse click and hold. I'm going to choose to move to view and then pick the view that I want it to appear in. And that's good. And I say, oh, you know what? Still need to move it around. I don't like how the dimension is appearing over there. And I also don't like how the text is appearing on the right side. I want it to appear on the left side. So I will click it. And then we have this icon for flipping the side of the text. I'll just move this in a little bit closer to where I want it to appear. All right, continuing on with my cleanup of the different dimensions. Let's say that, for example, this 6th dimension ended up over here, and I wanted it lined up with the 7th dimension. Well, you can drag it over to the snap line. Alternatively, you can select both of the dimensions and then hold down the right mouse button and then choose Align Dimensions, and it'll bring them together. The order actually matters, but now that I've got both of them selected, I can drag them over to the snap line so that they line up. I've got another dimension over here for the one value. Let's say I decide to move it up. Maybe I want the arrows to appear flipped, so I can go to the mini toolbar for the dimension, and then here we have the flip arrows dimension. I decide, oh wait, that's no good. Let me right mouse click and hold and choose flip arrows to go back to the previous orientation. I can grab this and get it to align with the snap line for that 7.50 dimension. Next up for the manipulation, I see a dimension over here, and initially I think, oh wait, let's place that in this view over to the side. So I can click on it and choose move to view, and then pick this other view, and then grab it and drag. And I realize it really even doesn't look good in this view because it is detailing something in the interior of the model. So let's say that I want to take this off the drawing sheet at this particular moment. There are a couple different ways of doing that. The first way is by using the erase command. If I click on a dimension, there's a little icon in the mini toolbar that looks like an eraser for a whiteboard. So I can click on that, and then it's still going to appear on the computer screen. This gives you a chance to say, oh wait, I actually didn't mean to erase it. I want to unerase it. But the next time that you click on the background of the screen, that dimension is going to be erased. And erase means that it's just temporarily removed from the view. Let me then change back to my general filter so I can figure out which drawing view this is. Okay, here we have in the drawing tree, this is engine block left. Here we have the annotations. You can see that one of the dimensions is grayed out, and this means that it has been erased. If you erase a dimension and you want to get it back, well, you can select it and then choose unerase from your mini toolbar, and it'll be back on the drawing sheet. Now, let's say I decide that I really don't want this dimension on this drawing view. Maybe I have a minimally dimensioned drawing and I just don't need this to appear on the sheet. You can click on the dimension, and then the icon that looks like an X allows you to delete it, and the delete key on the keyboard is the keyboard shortcut. Let me click on delete. Be aware that delete takes it off of the drawing. It's no longer listed in the annotations, but it is not deleted from the model. It's just deleted from the drawing sheet. If I actually want to get that dimension back, well, you're going to use Show Model Annotations, and then you're going to figure out which feature it is. Maybe it's this feature over here, and then click on the dimension, and then click the OK button. Now we've got that back on the drawing sheet. Lastly, for this video, let's take a look at our dimensional tolerances. We will cover geometric tolerances in a later video. Right now, all my dimensions are appearing in the nominal format. If you want to see your different tolerances, you're going to have to turn them on for your drawing. And the way that you do that is by going to the File command, and then Prepare, Drawing Properties. And in the Drawing Properties dialog box, there are three different choices. Here we have our Tolerancing Standard and our Tolerancing Standard version. You can click on the blue Change hyperlink for your detail options. And way down near the bottom of this list, there is a group where these options control dimensional tolerances. The one that you're interested in is called Tall Display. Be aware that there's also a configuration option called Tall Display, but that controls the display of your tolerances in a model, in part mode or assembly mode. There is a separate drawing detail option which controls the display of your tolerances in the drawing, so that can be a little bit confusing. Let's change the drawing detail option from the default no to yes, and then add change, and then you can click apply and close, or just click the OK button. Now I'll close here. I'm going to zoom in and zoom out to repaint, and when I do that, all my dimensions are now appearing with tolerances if they have them. Right now I see that a bunch of these tolerances are appearing as plus, minus, or upper and lower bounds. Let's say I want to change those different values. Well, again, I can swipe a box over my different dimensions. I'm going to change my selection filter to dimensions, and then grab those different dimensions. And then we have our dimension tab. Here we have the ability to change the tolerances. Before, when tall display was set to no, tolerance is going to be grayed out. So if you are ever trying to change tolerances, you're like, hey, why the heck is this stuff grayed out? Well, you need to change that drawing detail option from File, Prepare, Drawing Properties. So I'm going to change these to plus minus. That's how I want the different dimensions to appear. You can see that they are changed. And so with some of these different dimensions that I created manually, they are just out to 2 decimal places here. Let me change the value. So for example, maybe this can be up to plus 10 and minus point. Actually, let me make that a little bit bigger. Let's go to 0.1 and then deselect. Did I not actually change that? But try that one more time. There we go. You can change your different dimensional tolerances for these different linear tolerances. Now, some of your dimensions you're going to want to be basic dimensions, and so you can control that as well. So for example, I have these overlapping dimensions. Let me grab these now that I have the tolerances. They are cluttering things up a little bit. For example, maybe this dimension here I want to be a basic dimension. I will click on it, and then from tolerance, I can change from plus minus to basic, and it appears with the box around it. Same for this dimension. I can make it also a basic dimension and do that for any other dimensions that I want to have in that format. And so there you have it, the basics of setting up your drawings for having your dimensions detailed on there. In the subsequent video, we will take a look at your notes, geometric tolerances, and symbols.